And a happy Wednesday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. We have a very dreary forecast to go over as we go throughout the rest of your Wednesday, but I promise it is going to be a welcome trade-off as we go into the weekend. Kind of going ahead and having a little bit of tunnel vision as we look ahead to a spectacular forecast for the first time that we can say that over the last couple of weekends. But we'll go over the latest, and we're going to go ahead and start out with your rainfall totals so far that we do have over the course of this morning. It's nothing really substantial in nature, but we will take a look at all of Central Georgia, where most of these values that you do see scattered about around 1/4 of an inch of rain. But where you start to get some of the maybe more profound blue colors, like specifically here in Macon, over to Twiggs County, portions of Wilkinson, and into southern Jones County. This is where you are finding some totals upwards to about 1/2 inch, maybe even closer to an inch of rainfall at the very highest. This is only a select few spots. This is very isolated if you do see any totals that are going to be this high. And then it does look like we do see a trail, maybe some brighter blue that trails from west over to east, areas over in Dooley County, Crisp County, all the way through the northern half of Dodge County and over here into Treutlen County. Treutlen County has actually gotten its fair share of rain compared to the rest of the bunch. If you have one of these lighter shades of blue, that's simply going to indicate maybe some totals of around 1/10 of an inch, going to even be below 1/4 of an inch in nature. But the main thing that we have seen so far throughout this morning is just about everyone here in Central Georgia has received something in the way of rainfall. So this is going to be the first time we have recorded some rainfall during the month of February. First 3 days have now already put us down really right here into the dry category for the month, where we did end the month of January in the very dry category, even started to flirt with exceptionally dry. So no rainfall recorded just yet. This will all change as we go into tomorrow. But on average, I wanted to talk to you about some of your numbers. On average, we typically see around 4.5 inches of rain in the month of February, and the record came back in 2013. So 13 years ago, we had nearly 13 inches of some rain here in the month of February. We'll see if we can get anywhere close to that number, but right now, looks like February is off to a pretty dry start, and today is really looking like the only chance at some rain that we do have for the foreseeable future. So 2026 in itself is off to a pretty dry note, and obviously we've had our fair share of wintry precipitation throughout the month of January, so that isn't necessarily correlated to your liquid precipitation. Overall, we're around 2.5 inches below where we should be at this point of the year so far, but like I continue to mention, March, April, May, even getting into June and July, those are going to be some of the wettest months that we do have throughout the calendar year. And March, really all the way through the end of May, going to mark our severe weather season. So that is going to be where more substantial rainmakers do make their way through on a more frequent basis, maybe one or two just about each and every week. Those frontal boundaries are going to have some pretty heavy rainfall rates with them, as opposed to what we do see for the most part right now. It's really just some steady, maybe even some moderate rain showers, nothing really of the heavy nature. But all this data taken as of February 3rd. And again, we are a good deal below average, but I'm not fretting about it too much because I know what is going to be ahead as we go throughout the spring season and transition into the summer. So the biggest headline is a messy midweek, but that is going to be a good trade-off. This nasty forecast we have for your Wednesday and an even cooler afternoon throughout your Thursday. Both welcome trade-offs because the weekend is looking absolutely awesome. Cannot wait to tell you about that forecast. In fact, we'll talk about some of the numbers as we go into the beginning of next week, which may shock you a tad bit because they are going to contradict what the groundhog did say just about 2 days ago. And I'm sure that's music to a lot of your ears because I don't think I found too many fans of Beauregard Lee as of this year's Groundhog Day. Even got some boos as he made his prediction up there in Jackson on Monday morning. So here's the messy atmosphere that you continue to have present all across Central Georgia. Downtown Macon, Warner Robins, down here at the Georgia National Fairgrounds, and in downtown Dublin. Everyone dealing with some form of some light, maybe even some steady showers. There are plenty of wet surfaces, so obviously any plans that you have to drive out and about, run some errands, maybe you have a doctor's appointment, just allow for about 5, maybe even 10 extra minutes on that commute out and about. The roads are slick, so you obviously just want to take it a little bit slower, and you're very likely looking at a lot of water that's going to get kicked up in between the car that's driving in front of you and that can limit your visibility on the windshield, and obviously need to utilize the windshield wipers a good bit. But nonetheless, it just does not look like a forecast that you want to be outside for. I'm sure many of you had the same problem I did this morning, and it was just really hard to get out of bed. You were just very lazy in light of the dreary conditions that have settled in so far for the first half of the day. So here's a look at your temperatures. In light of an increase in moisture, so take a look at these winds coming in from the south and the southwest from the northern Gulf, all the way up here into central Georgia. That is ushering in a more humid air mass, and that is why you see areas here in the green down in the southeast corner of the United States. So finally, it looks like at least Florida, the peninsula, getting back on board with some of those warmer numbers that we have seen on this current temperatures graphic. 66 in Orlando, 65 in Jacksonville, 60 in Panama City, but 54 here in Macon. Pretty similar to what we see with our neighbors to the east in Charleston, and at 55 over in Montgomery for our neighbors over in the west. Areas in Texas a little bit cooler than what they have seen as of recently, but the frontal boundary that is continuing to guide our rain chances has actually already passed through areas of Texas. So we're starting to see a slightly cooler air mass move down from kind of areas of the southern plains into northern Texas, and then we can continue to see that deep dark blue color in areas like St. Louis, Indianapolis, up into Lexington, right there around the Ohio River Valley, maybe even getting over to the Mississippi River Basin. So here's a look at your current temperatures in the state of Georgia. You can see that we're holding on to maybe some 40s in the northernmost corner of the state, but those transitioning into 50s. For the most part, it does look like your temperatures are scattered about the 50s in Georgia and into South Carolina. As you get up into North Carolina, it's a little bit colder up into northwestern Alabama, northern Mississippi. You can really see a fine line of where this frontal boundary is. It's going to be, once again, where those winds are beginning to converge, and we can start to see that cooler air ushering in behind it. But it's not a frigid Arctic cold air mass that we'll be ushering in. It's only going to be a slightly cooler air mass that we're referring to over the course of your Thursday. So these numbers, would you believe it or not, they actually started out this morning at these numbers: 51, 52, 53s, and 54s. We have a 55 at the warmest right now, but it was crazy to see actually some green on your temperature graphic as you walked out the door this morning. And these numbers are quite different than, say, the mid-20s, the lower 20s, the upper teens that we have seen over the past 3 mornings. It is still chilly, don't get me wrong, especially when you pair it up with widespread rain and some gustier winds. And I know the feels like temperature won't necessarily say that there's a difference between these numbers and what it feels like outside, but it is just a messy and a bit of a chilly rain that continues to be present all about central Georgia this morning. But it's a whole lot better than what it could be. Obviously, if we had numbers as low as the last couple of mornings paired up with this widespread rain, it would be in the form of some widespread snow, which many of you would definitely take over having to walk out the door to a messy atmosphere. But anywho, it is obviously going to feel a lot more pleasant to walk outside, even though the numbers are still a bit chilly when you pair it up with the rain. Here's a look at your winds. We do see some sustained winds, maybe as low as 5 to 6 miles per hour, up to all the way 15-mile-per-hour winds in Macon, 14 in Cochran, and then we see those occasional gusts that are going to be a little bit greater. 13-mile-per-hour gust and 17-mile-per-hour gust all the way down in Cordele. Even a patch of red down here in southern Houston County, eastern Macon County, northern Dooley County. It does look like a good batch of some gusty winds. Might even be getting close to the Georgia National Fairgrounds here very shortly. So here's a look at the feels like numbers. All these numbers, once again, scattered about the low 50s. Except for Sandersville right here. Don't quite know what's going on. Feels like 49, but overall feels like number of 49 degrees compared to the low 50s for your actual temperatures. It basically feels the same. So obviously a little bit chilly, but it is very nice to see some green on most of these graphics. It is not necessarily nice to see plenty of green on this graphic, however. Satellite and radar shows plenty of cloud cover, so there are no peaks of sunshine whatsoever about central Georgia right now. And taking a look at just in terms of the rain, green is a dominating color that you can see. Obviously, it's probably more so a story of these darker greens, which once again, the darker green shade that you have, the heavier rainfall rate that you are going to have. So that's what I would refer to as maybe some steady showers, maybe even getting into a little bit of a heavy light shower if you really want to get into the nitpick specifics of it. But the most important thing that you're not seeing on here are lightning strikes. These are nothing in the way of storms. These are just going to be some general rain showers, and they have continued to be very widespread throughout the last couple of hours this morning. Now our southeastern counties are actually getting on board with some of the widespread coverage of this rain, even some pockets of yellow and some orange, which once again, that's kind of getting into moderate shower territory. Even if you get a flash of orange, I would say that even classifies as a bit of a heavy shower. Once you transition into some of these red colors, that's going to be more indicative of a thunderstorm. Typically, you get some heavier rainfall rates than what we do have currently present. You are going to start to hear some rumbles of thunder, and the winds get a bit gustier in nature. But right now, it's just a breezy and a dreary forecast. It's just kind of wet and messy, and that's how it's going to be really for the remainder of today. We'll time out these rain chances for the rest of your afternoon here in just a moment, but here's a big picture view, kind of a continuous trail, or what we like to call in the meteorology department, a continuous fetch of moisture that we're grabbing from the northern Gulf, and we're bringing it all the way across the state of Georgia, up into South Carolina, eventually up into North Carolina. And then the northernmost component of this rainmaker is actually going to be of the frozen variety, all the way up into eastern and kind of southern Virginia. I have seen some meteorologists up there that are posting for maybe snowfall accumulations of about an inch or two courtesy of this. All we're looking at here in central Georgia, just going to be roughly below an inch of accumulated rainfall from this rainmaker throughout your Wednesday. So let's talk about the numbers. 63 for an afternoon high yesterday, exactly what we had in the forecast and exactly what we were saying. The first time eclipsing this average mark in about 10 days time here in central Georgia. So that comes even despite your morning low starting out 10 degrees below what we should do. Normally start out around 37 degrees this time of year, and 80 degrees the record for 1989. And then the record low yesterday back in 1917 of 8 degrees. That is the coldest temperature that we've ever hit in the month of February. So that was one of our record-breaking days that we had over 100 years ago. Obviously no rain yesterday. I'm very interested to look at this graphic tomorrow, see how much rain we tally at Middle Georgia Regional Airport and what it does for our year departure of rain. Like I mentioned, we are still around 2.5 inches below where we should be at this point of 2026. I know we're only about a month in, but we could definitely start to use some more frequent rainmakers to at least get this number back a little bit closer to where we should be at this point, a couple days into February as far as rainfall goes. Sunrise 7:28, it looks like it got a minute earlier, and sunset at 6:09 p.m. So once again, sunrise continues to get earlier, sunset continues to get later and later. The hours of daylight are going to increase as we go throughout the rest of this month. So going back into January, remember the 23rd, that was the last time that we saw an above average high temperature. And both of these numbers were just slightly above average like we were talking about yesterday. But then the 24th, all the way through the 31st, a stretch of 8 days in a row with below average high temperatures. We really didn't even sniff average except for one time. We got really close as of the 30th with a high temperature of 58 degrees, and then 41 and 54 for high temperatures both Sunday into yesterday, and then as we go in, Monday, and then yesterday, Tuesday, finally getting back up into the 60s, the first time that we have been above average in the month of February, and the first time that we have seen an above average high in about a week and a half span. Well, today, not going to be much good news on that. We are not looking to extend the streak to 2. We are going to have a high temperature that is honestly pretty close to where your current numbers sit. 57 degrees for a high temperature, just below average by a couple of degrees. When you have widespread cloud cover and widespread rain in the picture for an extended portion of time, that is going to result in not too much range between your morning lows and your afternoon highs. So we are going to see maybe roughly about a 7 to 8 degree spread in between your morning low and your afternoon high. Nonetheless, it's a gloomy and a dreary atmosphere, but this is going to be some much needed rain, as we will talk about the drought monitor towards the end of this extended forecast. This will be paired up with a southerly wind consistent around 5 to 10, maybe even 15 miles per hour, but those occasional gusts could get up to around 20 miles per hour. But then the secondary headline for today, rain does eventually clear later. We're not seeing any signs of it as of right now, but I promise you, you will see signs of it a little bit later into the afternoon and into the evening, according to what FutureView has to say. So your hour by hour temperatures just going up about 2 or 3 more degrees and staying there as we go into the evening hours. As long as the cloud cover is still in the forecast, our numbers are going to be very reluctant to drop on down, but I do anticipate the frontal boundary to eventually pass, and that is going to lead to a pretty substantial temperature drop as we go into tomorrow morning. We are looking to bring back more of that winter chill in the forecast with some lows down somewhere in the mid 30s, maybe even somewhere in the upper 30s per se. So there is a look at what we're dealing with as of right now. Note that this isn't just a frontal boundary that could be sweeping through. We are very close to the center of low pressure right now. Right now is kind of on the three corners area of North Carolina, Tennessee, and northern Georgia. So as this front does continue to move through, we're going to be pretty close to that center of circulation right here. So that could send us maybe a few wraparound sprinkles as we go into tomorrow morning. We'll pay close attention to that once we pop it over to Future View here very shortly, which in fact is my next graphic. So kind of segueing over into what's in store for the rest of today. 2 p.m. rain still pretty widespread, maybe starting to see some signs of clearing. Now this is a little bit later, according to this latest model run, than what we were seeing. We were starting to see some clearing maybe closer to around lunchtime as of this morning. Nonetheless, just plan on having the rain gear ready to go throughout the rest of today. That goes for if you're heading out for a lunch break here shortly, maybe getting off work a little bit earlier, or any kids that possibly have me popped up on their phone in school, which I can't imagine that you do, but by chance, if there are one or two of you, you're going to need the rain jacket as you're heading out to the bus stop, maybe even getting into that parking lot walk that you have to make. I know we always had a long walk to the side parking lot over at Houston County High School. We definitely made sure that we had the rain jacket on days like this. So going into 5 p.m., right there around evening commute time, we can see the rain finally beginning to scatter out, but it still looks like it's present in our fair share of areas. Not only some light and steady showers, but maybe some pockets of kind of that moderate, maybe even borderline some heavy showers. Still nothing in the way of storms whatsoever. We're not looking at any of those chances throughout today. And then as we get into the evening, more so the nighttime hours, that's when rain finally looks to leave the picture. Maybe one or two areas. You get lucky and you get a glimpse of sunshine today. Consider yourself very lucky if you do see that. Otherwise, it's going to be well into tomorrow afternoon. That's how long it's going to take for us to finally get some sun back in the forecast. As we go into midnight tonight, remember what I was talking about, that counterclockwise circulation. And it looks like the center of low pressure might actually be in the near vicinity of us. Kind of hard to see with the winds right here, but as we progress overnight into tomorrow morning, this is what I was talking about, that rotation leading to some scattered sprinkles. And in areas to the north of us, where there is a colder air mass present, it's actually leading to a couple of scattered and spotty flurry showers, but that's not going to be the case here. We saw one model run maybe 2 days ago, maybe even going back to yesterday, that was popping up a cluster of some flurries around the I-20 corridor. That was the only model run we saw anything in the way of wintry weather pop up. In fact, I'm not even too confident that you're really going to see anything in the way of rain tomorrow morning. If you do, it's number one going to be in east central Georgia, and number two, it's going to be more of a mist and a brief sprinkle shower. If anything, I have a 10% chance of rain around Thursday morning just to cover the bases. But I think tomorrow is more of a forecast that you're wanting to pay attention to the cloud coverage, which we start out with a very gloomy atmosphere. Some sun comes up in the east. Over to the east of us, there continues to be nothing but cloudy skies. But as we go into the afternoon, really past lunchtime, that's when this cloud cover does finally begin to move out from west to east as this front and that low pressure center move farther and farther away from us. So 5 p.m., yes, it's kind of a half and half story in terms of your forecast here in central Georgia, but I still anticipate just about everyone to see that sunset tomorrow closer to 5 and 6 p.m. Why? Because take a look at what's over to the west. Clearing. So nothing but really almost completely clear skies if we had the exception of this little rope cloud right there in eastern Alabama. But that's where we are going to see the sunset over in the west. So even if you do have cloud cover directly overhead in Washington, Johnson, Lawrence, over to Treutlen, Montgomery counties, as you are looking out to the west and watching that sunset, you will get a pretty spectacular image because we do see that clearing pretty steadily throughout the late afternoon and the early evening hours. We'll have some cloud cover try to creep into the forecast, maybe overnight Thursday into Friday morning. It's mainly going to be to the north of us. For your Friday, I would just plan on completely sunny skies. You might have a few clouds here and there that are in the forecast, but it's not going to result in anything in the way of rain. And as I always say, my rule of thumb and kind of my motto when we're talking about future view, if I'm talking about what time clouds are passing over, you know it's a very uneventful forecast. So the future view takes us all the way to 4 a.m. on Saturday, and the nice weather stretch is looking to continue as we go into the beginning of your weekend as well. So future view rainfall. It does look like areas down to the east and the southeast here in central Georgia are going to get a little bit more rain than areas farther up to the north and the northwest, because areas in northwest central Georgia have been holding on to the rain for the longest this morning. So remember, that front moves through, rain chances taper off from northwest down to the southeast. Only looking to add maybe about a half inch of rainfall to the totals that we've already seen. We'll have a couple isolated spots that at the end of it all probably have about an inch of rain, but for the most part I would think that we're probably dealing with maybe around 1/4 of an inch to around 3/4 of an inch in terms of your rainfall, which is not very substantial, but any little bit of rain helps, and it's something to get us on the board for the month of February. We'll keep our fingers crossed that next week does bring us a pretty sufficient and a pretty substantial rain chance at that as well. So your numbers over the next 2 days, we won't focus on Friday just yet, but they're going in the opposite direction. 57 down to 51 for a high temperature after we hit 63 yesterday. We were talking about the brief cool down that we are going to see. And number one, today is going to see a temperature range of about 10 degrees. 47, I think I definitely went well below what the morning low was here in Macon, somewhere around 50 degrees, maybe even 49 degrees. But 57 for a high temperature. We do see the numbers drop even despite the clouds being present into Thursday morning. And then that 10% chance of a sprinkle is present for just the morning hours, but the cloud cover will eventually finally fall apart as we go into the afternoon. 51 for a high temperature. Here comes that slightly cooler air behind the frontal boundary, pushing all of this rain out of the picture that we do see today. I mean, 90% chance of rain. I could have very well popped that up to 100 because I'm pretty confident that everyone in central Georgia has already seen something in at least the way of a very light drizzle or mist shower at the very least, to maybe even your fair share of some puddles that are out and about as you are going out this afternoon. Now 60 degrees for a high temperature on Friday. Let's not forget about that morning low temperature on Friday morning. It is going to be pretty chilly and pretty frigid. We are popping back below freezing temperature. It's just given the temperatures that we have seen to start out each of the last couple of mornings. 27 doesn't feel all that cold, but I promise you, compared to the numbers you feel today and as you feel into tomorrow afternoon, 27 is definitely going to be a bit of a shell shock. So make sure that you are bundling up as you walk out the door on Friday morning, and you can shed those layers as you go into the afternoon with the high temperature right there near average and plenty of sunshine. And that is actually going to be kind of a copy and paste forecast for your Friday that you will take into your Saturday afternoon as well. In terms of the breezy conditions, you should expect those to be on and off throughout the next couple of days. But overall, I think you have the potential throughout this afternoon into the evening, all the way into tomorrow morning to potentially see a gust up to 15, maybe 20 miles per hour. And that might have some influence, especially tomorrow morning, on what the feels like numbers are going to be if we are going to drop down, say, into the mid-30s. Going into Thursday afternoon, still nothing really in the way of substantially breezy conditions. Those, believe it or not, will actually build in as we go into Friday. So already starting out with a bit of a light breeze on Friday morning, and then Friday afternoon into the evening, there's where we see the return of those widespread yellow and red patches on this graphic. That's going to be the potential for some gusts up to 25, maybe even 30 miles per hour. So the only downside of Friday, it is going to be probably the best looking day in terms of the next 3 days in your short-term forecast, but go ahead and plan on it being a bit of a bad hair day as we wrap up the work week. And then we go into Saturday morning where we continue to keep that breeze present, and it remains to be seen how long that breeze does stick in the forecast as we go into the weekend. So brief cool down for Thursday, a very wet Wednesday. They are both going to be a welcome trade-off for a weekend forecast that looks like this. High temperatures at 60 and 62 degrees. We could very likely look at those numbers to go up, but we are hovering near where we should be Friday, Saturday, and into Sunday. Pretty similar to how we felt as of yesterday afternoon as well. If you can go ahead and remember that, a little bit of that short-term memory, that's basically what it's going to feel like each and every afternoon as we go into the weekend. But the morning lows are still going to have their fair share of a chill to them, bouncing up and down between the 30s, maybe even the upper 20s. No number is really going to be substantially below freezing temperature, but we could have our fair share of some upper 20s. If the breeze is present, they could feel a little bit colder. So you'll want to layer up for those mornings, but the afternoons, like I said, are going to be the times that you can go ahead and shed some of those layers. And any afternoon outdoor activities that you have. First time I've been able to say this in a couple of weeks. Let them fly this weekend. Friday all the way into Saturday, crystal clear here in central Georgia. Few clouds to the north of us on Sunday. Nothing that results in any rain chances. We continue the dry stretch all the way into Monday. Then as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, it does look like we might start to see a little bit of moisture back in the forecast. Wednesday morning, we could look at our next rain chance to be almost exactly a week apart from the one that we were talking about as of today. So fair share of widespread showers, but there's not a lot of model agreement whatsoever. Not seeing anything definitive as of right now, about a week out in advance, but we can go ahead and plan on maybe next Wednesday having about a 20% chance of rain once it pops up on your 7-day forecast a little bit later on this afternoon. So speaking of that 7-day forecast, this isn't going to be the end. I typically do like to end it off with the 7-day forecast, but I'll touch on this very briefly and we'll talk a little bit about what's ahead past the end of your 7-day forecast, something that I typically kind of reserve for Fridays, but I haven't done it in a while. And now we're kind of getting back into our regular routine, it feels like. Really good chance of rain today. And once again, keep that rain gear handy throughout the rest of today. You may get a moment of some clearing and maybe the showers finally subside. Just because the showers stop doesn't mean that they are completely out of the picture. I don't expect them to be completely out of the picture until we go into the late night hours tonight. 10% chance of a drizzle tomorrow morning. That's more of a cover the bases rain chance. I think it's very likely or very unlikely that you see anything in the way of rain. 51 for a high temperature, and remember, the clouds aren't going to really clear us until we get later in the afternoon, but I do expect you to finally get a glimpse of that sunset tomorrow evening. Then we head into the weekend, Friday, Saturday, and on into Sunday, nothing but sunshine, some near average high temperatures, absolutely beautiful. But if it's not quite too warm for your liking, you are really wanting to thaw out after this very frigid stretch of weather that we've had recently, I have some spectacular news for you. 67 degrees for a high on Monday, 69 on Tuesday. We're seeing some models call for 70s as early as next Tuesday. So finally getting some well above average numbers, and definitely going to come as a very pleasant sight and a very pleasant feel if we do see some numbers up that high after how cold that we have been. But something to be on the lookout for as of tomorrow when we do this. We will be updating the drought monitor, see how any of these winter weather chances, maybe even some steady rain chances that we've seen as of recently are going to be impacting this drought monitor. And then we'll take a look at your temperature outlook for 8 to 14 days out in advance. So this is going to be as of next Wednesday all the way through, I believe it is going to be next Tuesday. So the February 11th through the 17th, not only just a slight chance of seeing some above normal numbers, but pretty good chance. We are 3 boxes over to the right, maybe even getting into borderline 4 right here on our westernmost counties. So the farther and farther away from the middle, that gray shade that you do see, if you go over in the right direction or you go over in the left direction, that's going to indicate a higher chance of seeing some above normal numbers or some below normal numbers. Now, as we go into this extended kind of time frame of your forecast, I would say your average high temperature going to be roughly around 62 or 63 degrees, and your average low is going to be closer to around 39, maybe 40 degrees. So we are forecasting some numbers that will be above those thresholds for your afternoon highs and your morning low temperatures. So that's something to keep in mind. This may be only some numbers in the upper half of the 60s, but it could also indicate maybe some 70s in the near future. But all I know is one thing for sure: it's the complete opposite of what the groundhogs did have to say. So we'll try to hold on to this warmer stretch of weather as we go into the middle of the month of February. But sometimes a little bit of a premature warm up at the end of winter can lead to maybe even a bit of an early start to your severe weather season. So hopefully that's not necessarily the case. Hopefully we just have another couple calm weeks of weather that we are actually going to have some conducive temperatures to spend some time outdoors, but we'll continue to keep you updated as we get closer and closer. And looking ahead, this is something I typically like to reserve for weekends as well, but I did have some updating to do with this graphic. Super Bowl going to be in 4 days, and I'm very happy that I can bring you some amazing weather in your forecast for any plans that you do have throughout your Sunday. Valentine's Day going to be in 10 days, so not going to be this Saturday, but Valentine's Day is going to be next Saturday. Then 2 days after that, going to be President's Day. So some of you might be pairing up Valentine's Day weekend with a 3-day weekend and having Monday off on President's Day. And then after that, we look ahead to the beginning of March 8th to be specific, because that is going to be our time change. And it's a little bit hard to see the writing on here, but we are springing forward. That means you are going to lose an hour of sleep overnight, but what you are going to have is a more appropriate time of the sunset. Sunset is actually going to be back closer to around 7:30, 7:40 into the evening, and it's finally going to feel like those hours of daylight are kind of correlating with your daily routine that you do have. So it will be something to look forward to. I know obviously a lot of you not excited about losing that hour of sleep, but hey, They'll just gain it back once we get all the way into November and we begin to fall back when daylight saving time does come to an end. So this time change is going to mark the beginning of your daylight saving time. So a lot to look ahead about and a lot of warmer temperatures that continue to be in your 7-day forecast. I know everyone was stressing about what the groundhog said on Monday, but as of right now, the first and the second week of those predictions are really not looking to come to fruition. Let's continue that for the next 4 weeks after as we propel ourselves into the spring season. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow at 11 a.m.